How's it going, everybody? Akiabar is coming up, and it's the biggest Grand Archive event we've seen to date, so it's going to be a good one. But this is a kind of a crazy meta to be going to a very large event for this game to compete in because of how many decks are in the meta. And I've grabbed a handful, and by a handful I mean a large handful of decks that you will probably see at this event. And there's still more that we won't be able to cover in this video, but we'll do a little honorable mention at the very end of the video, and just to give you a heads up of what you might even see those decks. But here's decks that I'm almost certain you will see at this event. Now, you might not play against these decks, but you will definitely hear about them. So let's just jump right in. First one being Tristan. So most of these decks I'm just grabbing from various events. A lot of them were actually from Ascent Auckland, mostly because I was there, so I was familiar with lists that were there, and also because Ascent Auckland actually had a really big variety for being such a small event. So and now you might not see this exact list, but you'll see something similar to these lists, so don't take these for like 100%. This is exactly what you'll see, obviously, but it is a good idea, and we'll talk about how these decks play, each one. So Tristan, this one obviously has the Shadow Reaver in it. Some are playing that, some are not, but basically what Tristan does, it starts at level 1, obviously, and goes up and slowly gains prep counters. It won't really go to level 2. They don't want to go level 2 until they have 4 prep counters, so they get double, 2 draws off that level 2. And then once they get to level 3, they're going to keep trying to get a little bit of prep generation. And so they can go for a really large Shadow Strike, or maybe a Slice and Dice earlier on, even before they get to level 3. So a Slice and Dice and Assassin Ripper, this combination here. So you got Assassin Ripper here, where it's a 1-cost 1/2 weapon that you can remove a preparation counter from your champion and gives it +2 power, this weapon, and then you can use it with Slice and Dice here. And this is a combination where you have both these cards. It will, the Ripper out on board, and you have a total of 4 preparation counters. You can use Slice and Dice with that to do 15 damage in one big burst. Yes, there's a way to play around it. There's ways to get out of it. Stuff like Crystallized Destiny is a great one, because if you just stop that initial hit, they won't be able to do any extra damage, and so it kind of just the second combat fails because this is an on hit for Slice and Dice to be able to do that second combat. But that is a really early game or early on combo they can do, and they put down some decent allies like Sadis and Ascents to deal a little bit of damage here and there. But that is the main. That is one main combo they can go for. And then another one is, of course, like I said, the Shadow Strike, where they get a bunch of preparation counters. They can use these mastermind schemes if they need to get a bunch of them and then double them up if they want to with a mastermind scheme, or they sometimes don't even need that. They just need allies on board to keep doing chip damage with their clones or whatever, and then go for a Shadow Strike for like 12, 15 damage. And that's really hard to block, obviously, because this is unblockable, and it can be hard to prevent a really tall attack like that. But again, Crystallized Destiny is a great one, except for they do have Incapacitate, which is a really scary card to play around. So stuff like Regal Inquisition is really, really good against this deck, and can help you get a really good game plan. Also, another thing is that they don't have a really good way to get out of stealth. So if they're attacking you and you're able to use stealth, they also play Innervate Agility. This is a 1 of in this deck. Some are playing 2 or even 3, but that is a really good card for you to play as well. Anything that can give your champion stealth, so that way you can stop the damage from coming through. Again, you have to play around Incapacitate, so if you're a level 3 deck, like I mentioned earlier, Regal Inquisition is a really good card. But let's move on to the next deck here, which is, there's actually 2 decks here. One's this one, obviously, which is Lorraine, just Crux Lorraine. We've seen it in the past, and you've seen it before. It's just a level 3 deck that's just using general value of the power of fire right now, and those liminal guides and fluffy shopkeeps, and then getting to level 3 and doing really big swings every single turn. But they don't have to go for that. They can do like just a Hone Rending on turn 2 and hit you for like 18 damage with Inert Sword. So just so you guys know, the combination for that is they go to level 2, they get +2 power from their level 2. They have Inert Sword here, which is another 2 power that they get out earlier in the game, and then they can Hone for another 2, so it's a total of 6, and then they Rending Flames, and Rending Flames is 3, so 3 + 6 is 9 doubled, which with these on attack, make sure they have 3 fire cards in their graveyard. 9 doubled is 18, so they actually hit you for 18 at level 2, and that's not difficult for them to do. When they're using stuff like Creative Shocks and Cremation Rituals, and even 3 Hearts That Die, or even that Hone by Fire, they can just hit you for a lot of damage really, really quickly. And then after they do that, they can still just go to level 3 and just start hitting you and beating you down because they've been putting swords in their banishment with fluffy shopkeeps, and that's just going to pump their damage because of Crux Knight Lorraine, where Lorraine's attacks get +1 power for each regalia weapon card in your banishment, and you can just kind of forcibly put weapon cards in your banishment without just breaking them. Clarence, another one that allows you to do that. So this deck has a lot of actually utility. It's surprising how much utility it actually has, and actually a lot of burst as well. And so don't be surprised to see this deck. It's a very common deck. It's a very straightforward deck. It's annoying to play around because if you're an ally-based deck, or you put at least more than 2 allies on board, Flame Sweep is coming in for a lot. Even if you only put 2 allies on board, I mean, Flame Sweep is really good even just then. So you have to be really careful with the deck because they can push way quicker than you expect. One of the things that's really annoying to play against while you're on this deck, so something you might want to play and consider to play in this deck is, again, Crystallized Destiny. I think that is one of those cards that people just aren't thinking about too much. Because it feels bad to play because of how expensive it can be, but it can really come in clutch when they're going out to Rending Flames for a total of 18 damage. A single Crystallized Destiny can save you, as most of them are not on Capacitate. Some are on like a 1 or 2 of, and that kind of brings us to our next one, which is the Sword Saint's Vow version of this deck. Now, this one can even go even crazier. They're a little more fragile when it comes to stuff that removes, like Fracturize, that removes, that sword, basically. So if they go to use Hone or Tempered Steel to make their Sword Saint's Vow bigger, this gets bigger for every single Swordcraft card you play, and specifically the durability that you play. With more durability, this becomes stronger. And so you can do really, really big Rending Flames turns with this. So as I'm saying that, though, you probably recognize that what's the biggest downfall of Rending Flames? And, well, that is a Nullifying Lantern. Nullifying Lantern's really good. It turns off the graveyard. These decks do rely on it quite a bit. If they're not on something like Devastating Blow, which this deck is not, it can make it harder for them to get to the point they want to, right? The damage numbers that they want to. Now, both decks have a way to flex out of that Nullifying Lantern if they come across it. Now, they do just have like reduced to ashes, so they can't just blow it up. But let's say you Fracturize Lantern against this deck. That obviously is very good, but because you can pump the damage of Sword Saint's Vow so easily, they can still attack for big attacks. If they bring this out, they play double Hone. Hone is a swordcraft that puts a durability on it. So this is giving your weapon +2. It's giving it a durability, and since it's swordcraft as well, this has an ability that says whenever you activate a craft action card, put 2 durability counters on it. And then this has +1 attack for each durability counter on it. So right now, when you just bring this out, it is a 1 power, 1 durability sword. If you activate Hone by Fire, it's going to give it 2 durability, so that's actually a 3 power. And then Hone is going to give it another durability just from its own effect, and then it's going to give it +2 more power on top of that. So it's actually 6 power from one for the sword and a single Hone. And then if they have any other swords in their banishment, then it's going to be even bigger, easily swinging for 10 without even worrying about a Rending Flames to double it or anything like that. So this can pump damage really quickly, even if you do use Reduce. But then you're thinking, okay, what about this deck? The original deck that it seems like it only has Rending Flames. Well, out of the side, they are on Devastating Blows. Devastating Blow is a really, really good card. It just allows them to swing for 7 once they're level 3, and that attack can't be retaliated against. So if you have a Majestic Spirit on board, they can actually just swing right into it, and even though it's awake, it can't be retaliated against. So that's a way they can do it now. Game 1. They might not, obviously, they might not have it. Some actually are playing in the main. I think it's a really good card to even put in the main, so don't be too shocked if you see them have it in the main, but it can still slow them down with a Nullifying Lantern. But like I said earlier, also Crystallized Destiny, because most of these decks don't have the room to put an Incapacitate in it as well. So most likely this is all they have, just to run a Crystallized Destiny to save them. So if you have a way to prevent that or to stop that, to pop them, or sorry, if you have a Crystallized Destiny, they don't have a way to stop it or pop it really easily or to incapacitate it. The only way they can is with something like Ascension. So just be aware of those Ascensions. And some, again, are also on Smokeouts, which also can deal 1 damage to a unit. So you got to make sure you're playing around stuff correctly when it comes to Crystallized Destiny. But certainly it's harder. They have to have the right combination of cards to do everything they want and the influence to do so. Next deck we will talk about is Merlin. kind of similar to these other decks, but it's going to keep gaining value as the game gets longer and longer because they get more damage and they get more cards. So this deck obviously is just kind of going to level 3 pretty quickly, although they can take more turns off if they play correctly and they have the right cards to do so. And they send that level 2 to start eating your floating memory, which can be really annoying. They can also go to level 1 and DG into level 2 and then eat your floating memory like pretty much right away, or your liminal guides, whatever it might be. Now they won't get a counter, level counter for the liminal guide, but it still takes away a resource from you. They can also eat fire cards in graveyards, so if you have a kind of graveyard strategy, they can remove that with Merlin, level 2 here. But something to be aware of is that they are on sudden steals, and sudden steals come in for a lot of damage very often because a lot of them are now on prismatic edge. So this sometimes it's in and sometimes it's out of Merlin. Now it's in currently. Some of them, this deck does not have it, but actually a lot of them are on Majestic Spirit. So there's ones that you have to play around Majestic Spirit, and you have to play around Ascension, or play around these fireballs and play around these sudden steals. Like, there's just a lot that you have to be aware of. And they have some defenses still too. This one's only on one Crystallized Destiny, one Resolute stand, but sudden steal with a prismatic edge with a buff, the Merlin level where he has even counters, can come in for 10 damage. So just like those Merlin or those Lorraine swings I was talking about earlier, they can get to pretty high attack damage swings. And of course, on top of that, they always have fireballs. Fireballs have been the #1 card, I think, in Merlin. I don't know if there's ever been a deck that's topped any event or even day 2'd with anything less than 4 fireballs. So non-attack damage is big in this deck. Again, Crystallized Destiny, pretty darn good. The problem with this deck is that even though it has some defenses, it's actually not that much. And so some of them, like I said, then this one's not even on Majestic Spirit, but some are Majestic Spirit, but they have to go for that. And so if you're running stuff, like if you're in Tristan, you're running stuff like Incapacitate for those fireballs, for those Majestic Spirits, Incarnate Majesties or whatever, that's a really, really good card to play against them. And if you have the ability to do that because of how your deck plays or whatever it might be, then obviously that's a really good card to play. But basically, this deck really just tries to get value by putting a bunch of floating memory into their graveyard and then using it to level up efficiently. So stuff like Censor, that's also against these decks. Censor is also really good against the Lorraine decks as well, because they're doing the same thing where they're just putting a bunch of floating memory or liminal guides in their graveyard and then using those to fuel their game plan. So they get to level 3 with a big influence and start doing their crazy big turns like they want to. Merlin's been around for a while. I won't talk about any more than that. A new-ish deck, I guess it's new to HVN, but we definitely saw its popularity rise drastically here in DTR, which is Guoa, level 3 Guoa, specifically with the Azurite Fate Stone. So the big old blue dragon that comes down and starts allowing you to cast arcane blasts in a non-arcane champion deck. There's 2 ways this deck can play. It can either turbo to level 3 and just instantly get there and think, oh, cool, they just use all their cards to get down to nothing, and now that all they have is one dude, I'm good. Unfortunately, that's actually not the case usually. They do turbo level 3. They do go down to like 1 influence, maybe even 0. But because of Incandescent Reliquary, they can quickly get back up to an influence that is scary. And as soon as they're at that point, they can start activating cards like Siryu's Command and Byaku's Command to start really pumping damage really quickly, threatening lethal very quickly. And so if you don't have an out to this Azurite Fate Stone, the biggest and easiest out being the something like Ensnaring Fumes, which if you're not on Tristan, it can be kind of expensive to run Ensnaring Fumes. Ensnaring Fumes is a 5-cost action assassin skill that puts cards, all allies, back into their owner's hand. Now, since this is an Azurite Fate Stone is a Regalia, it actually puts it back into the deck, it doesn't put it back into your hand. And so essentially it destroys it. It makes it really, really hard for them to bring back out. They probably are never going to bring back out from that point on. So unless you have this, it is really hard to remove that though. So the Azurite Fate Stone is really good. It puts a big old dragon on board. It is really scary, and if they turbo there, if your deck cannot handle that, you probably can lose very, very quickly. They also have a lot of really quick, cheap defense with innervated agility. Some of them are unveiling. Innervated agility is probably the most common one. So again, incapacitate's really good against that kind of stuff. Win Tristan is probably the best deck encounter to this deck. So if you really just want to beat this down and make sure you're not going to lose to it, then maybe consider Win Tristan. Although we are only less than a week out from this event, so maybe don't switch last minute here. But if you have experience on the deck, definitely consider it. You may think that Dream Fairy is good enough. Unfortunately, level 2 here has a lineage release that says negate target activation or trigger that targets a Fate Stone or Fatebound object you control. So if they're level 3 and they have this dragon out on board and you go to Dream Fairy it, they can just lineage release and save their dragon. They can also just use Stifling Traps because that's an on-enter from Dream Fairy. They also be thinking, okay, cool, I'll run Arrow Trap instead. Arrow Trap is a similar thing that could remove this Azurite Fate Stone. Again, unfortunately, they can actually just lineage release for that and stop that from happening. But the biggest thing you can try to do to stop that from happening, to stop them, or to be able to destroy their Azurite Fate Stone, is if you are beating them down enough where you force them to use Innervate Agility via a spell or a really large attack, and they use that to save themselves. And so now they go from level 3 down to level 2. Now that they're level 2, you can then use a Dream Fairy or something to remove that Azurite Fate Stone or the Azure Dragon from board. And now they won't be able to lineage release because lineage release is an effect that you can only activate if it's below another champion card, essentially. So if you are level, you can only activate it basically once you're level 3. And if they lineage release their level 2, or sorry, if they go from level 3 down to level 2, they won't be able to lineage release to save it. And if they try to go to, another thing that might be helpful is if you use a Dream Fairy to Azurite Fate Stone, on the Azurite Fate Stone, or the dragon, to remove it, and they lineage release, and then you go for like a kill, if they try to innervate agility down from level 3, they will go all the way down to level 1, and they don't have that level 2 to go back up into anymore, and so they can't even get back up to level 3. So now they're stuck at this 19 life champion, which obviously is a very vulnerable position for them to be in. So something to think about is just trying to force out the lineage releases from this, force out the innervated agilities, because that might just be what wins you the game right there on the spot, because you're forcing them to play awkwardly. That all being said, that's if they turbo to level 3 and get out that Fate Stone or that dragon right away. This deck can also play a beatdown game plan, and a lot of people don't realize this. So they have these Ascents. A lot of them have been playing this Long-Tail Growth Sword. Obviously, Wind Engineers and like some Dream Fairies and Brisk Windtrotter, but this Brisk Windtrotter can pump a lot of damage really quickly, and this Beseech Fate Stone, don't forget about this card. This can become a 3/4 beast, and so they can put a 3/4 Ascent on board. They can put a 3/4 beast on board with Vigor. And they can also buff them with this Brisk Windtrotter. They can use a Long-Tail Grove Sword to put on board just as a 2/3 essentially, but then if you buff it, it becomes a 4/5 with Brisk Windtrotter as long as they're level 2. And so they can start putting down these allies that really are just forcing you to play defensively, use your defensive cards, maybe use your Ensnaring Fumes if you're in Tristan, whatever it might be, and then they can, once they're at that point and you use some kind of huge defensive, maybe like I said, that Ensnaring Fumes to stop your game plan of beatdown, then they'll go to level 3, and then they'll bring out their dragon, and then they'll swing with that, and then now you lost the defense of that Ensnaring Fumes. You lost the defense of that, maybe that Dream Fairy or that Arrow Trap or whatever it might be using to try to save yourself from that dragon, but they didn't need to even use that dragon. So be careful. They have a way to flex around what they want, the different types of game plans they want, especially if they're a really good player. Just pay attention to what they might do. Next, we have CL. So there's 2 CL decks. I don't expect this deck to be repped that much. And actually, technically, there's a 3rd CL deck that I didn't even include here because I think it gets beat out by a lot of decks in the meta currently. It is good, but with how vast and varied the meta is, it can be very hard for that deck to survive, which is Water CL. I think it is an incredibly strong deck, but probably more so when it has the ability to know exactly what it's playing against. But since like I said, there's 12 decks in this meta, it's hard to do so. So Fire CL, I think, is going to be more represented than Water CL. I could be wrong, but there are 2 different types of Fire CL decks. I'm just going to cover these briefly. The biggest and most common, or not the biggest, the one that I think is a little less likely, I should say, is Advent CL, actually. We saw it actually at Auckland, so it could be because we saw it at Auckland that it might come up here more often as well. This has 2 game plans as well, just like the Guoa deck does. where it can go to that Advent game plan. So it finds that Advent early, it can pitch off a Creative Shock, and it can pitch off its level 2, discard it, whatever it might be, and then use that with Baleful Ablation to deal 15 damage to the entire board other than their own champion, and basically just blow you out. I mean, it's crazy how much damage that is. Obviously, 15 damage is a lot from a 3 cost card, and they can also bring back Baleful Ablation in multiple ways and reuse it as well. If they have more Advents in hand, they can obviously use Maximum Armor. Maximum Armor is a good card for 2 different reasons. We'll cover that in a second. But yeah, it can go for this Advent game plan. But if they think they're against a deck that won't be the case, or Advent just isn't in their hand and they're not able to discard it, it's just getting to the point where they can't do that, they will just go for a slow beatdown game plan. Kind of similar to what I was talking about with Goja. They can just get to level 3. They can start just putting on Omens, just like they normally would. And once they're level 3 and putting on Omens, they're dealing 2 damage, unpreventable damage to your champion every single turn, if they want to do it that way. And they can just get to stuff that allows them to use enough Omen reserve cost to use Extorting Blackjack, which is just a really large attack that can recover them damage technically, or recover them life, but it is a 12 damaging attack, and that on top of the mastery that CL has, also come in for a lot, and those 2 pings that they get from casting, or making an Omen every single turn can also come up as well. You also use it with Grand Sonri, or Sonia, I forgot how this is pronounced, but this is a 4 power weapon potentially, and if they're going for that game plan, it will be a 4 power weapon, and so there's damage from that. There's Maximum Armor, which can put an Omen that is, or take an Omen from your banishment, put it into your hand, and then make a new Omen. That's also going to do 2 damage from Maximum Armor from the CL level 3, so something to pay attention to there. They can also just start making Omens, and then once they get to a point where they say, hey, I think I can put Advent under here and start doing Baleful Ablation, they can bring out Orb of Sealing and start, getting rid of some of those Omens, turning them face down, and now their reserve cost does not count when it comes to Baleful Ablation, and so they can still go for that Advent game plan. And so you got to be careful, because they can do that at a surprise. They can also do stuff like Regal Inquisition and Steal Your Hand. I mean, this deck has a lot of toolboxy effects, but is essentially it can flex into different game plans if it needs to. The more toolboxy effect deck, though, is just a generic Fire CL, where they're just going to level 3. They're using some tricks here and there. They reuse cards here and there, and they are just going for this control game plan, where there's every single turn they're going to start swinging for a decent amount of damage. Every single turn they're going to be chipping you with that end of turn Omen effect from level 3. Every single turn they have the option to bring back something from their Omens at fast speed, depending on what they use, and just really control the game. It's definitely a slower game plan, but is a very, very good game plan, because they can, if they get the right matchups, if they're a very good player too, they just know what their lines are. It's going to feel like you can't do anything because they just have complete control. Obviously, it depends on what they see, but is a very, very scary deck to play against. Censor can be really good against this deck. Some of them are on Reduce. I think probably most of them are on Reduce, yeah. But Censor can slow them down if they don't see that. They don't see that Reduce to Ash, then it might be a good card to bring out against this deck as well. The problem with this deck is that both these decks is that they can either be bricky or they can be slow. And so stuff that have a really straightforward game plan, like Guoa, stuff that has a really straightforward game plan, like the Merlin and Lorraine's, can kind of just beat them out of the meta, and that can be something that's pretty scary to see for these decks, right? Since those are popular decks, they're probably going to see those decks, and so I don't expect a ton of people to play these decks, but I do want you guys to be aware that they are a thing and what the game plan is. And the game plan is pretty much just beat down one way or another, whether it be a really large, slowly, get to a point where they just start casting Advents and dealing a bunch of damage that way, or whether it be a beatdown of just really controlling the game and using their champion to just whittle you away and control the board. The next deck, now, this might be an interesting one that you think, that why would I suggest this deck as one that we might see? But it's really rising in popularity. People also just love this deck. I think people not only undervalue it, but also the people that love it overvalue it sometimes. But I think right now in the current meta, it is a very decent pick. And I think you guys might see this over at SEA as well, in SEA in Japan there. And it's just Wind Ari. This has been around for a bit. It's just going to level 3. It's pretty much just turboing there. and using their Polaris to either clear board and get some Cosmic Bolts, or just getting level 3 and negating the stuff you have and then slowly using Cosmic Bolts. Eventually they'll use this Polaris pretty much no matter what to get those Cosmic Bolts. But this deck, yeah, it's just going level 3. It does not have good defense early. It has a lot of recovery early, if anything, with the fast gears that regenerates in 3 visits. But and also the lineage release. So don't forget about that. But this deck, I think, really only thrives and really is really strong and powerful, and the times where it feels like it's unbeatable is when they open Fertile Grounds. It can win without it, of course, and they have ways to search it because they have Spirit of Serene Wind, and they also have a Scout the lands, so they can just go for that turn 1 Serene Spirit, get pretty much bottom deck everything, maybe keep a Scout the lands, and then see if they draw for the Fertile Grounds, and if they don't turn 1, then they can try to scout and try to find it even 4 deeper. So they can dig quite a bit for this. It is not over if they don't find it. They can use Gentle Respites and ton the lands to get to level 3 like they need to, but it can be a lot harder, and their game plan is going to be a lot slower. But Fertile Grounds really blows it out of the water, so this deck is doing non-attack damage. It's dealing almost 0 attack damage. The only attack damage that's going to be coming through is from this dungeon guide, probably. So don't expect attack damage. Side out those Resolutes. Maybe side in some amulets of Safeguard Amulets, or maybe Crystallized Destinies, or any other kind of non-attack damage prevention you can bring in. Like I said, if they don't have this Fertile Grounds, so stuff like Scatter Essence is really good. Stuff like Disenchant is really good. If you can blow this up and force them to not get those herb counters or those herb item tokens, their game plan's gonna go a lot slower. Also, something that I think is underrated is this ingredient pouch that they bring on board. If they bring this out early, especially if they bring it out early, this is a great reduce to ash target, because they recognize, if they're bringing this out early, they recognize that they're not gonna be able to get more herbs because they don't have the Fertile Grounds as quickly, and they might need to go turn off where it might be, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna need these herbs because I need to get big enough damage for this Polaris. I need to put enough Cosmic Bolts in my deck, so I need to get these herbs one way or another, and so they might be bringing this in. So reduce the ash. If you see this, if you see them bring this out early, definitely consider this as a reduce the ash target. Not always, but obviously try to figure out the state of the game and the current board state and all that. You might be able to kill them. You'd think aggro is really good against this. Honestly, every time I've played fire aggro like Xander into this deck, it can feel really brutal. They have so much recovery. The amount of recovery they have is insane. The Serene Lineage release is obviously 6 from that. The 3 visits is pretty much a constant 2, unless you can get rid of it some way, or turn it off from graveyard or where it might be. Or not from graveyard, I'm sorry. Turn off from like sensor in the graveyard. And then also they have like nascent barriers and stuff like that, but fast cure is another one. They can get really low influence really easily, so this fast cure is actually going off pretty often. But it can be really hard to deal with all that recovery for a Xander that's going for like burst. So don't think just that fire aggro Xander is the answer. A different fire aggro variant might be able to make it, but yeah, that's this deck. I won't talk about it too much again. We've seen it. This deck, I won't even talk about this deck that much because we just did a deck profile on it, but expect to see it, which is Wind, Razer Gale, Kongming. Essentially, they put a bunch of... They try to find a single Razer Gale. That's all they need. A single Razer Gale, like turn 1. They can, find it decently easy with Scout the Lands and the draw 7. Sometimes they don't, and if they don't, you're probably pretty happy that occurred. But, and then they're going for stuff like a way to maybe suppress something or whatever, so they can cast Tempest Downfall for really cheap. But they have Bagwas, they have Usurps, they have the Fairy Whispers, they have a lot of cards that are really cheap and can cycle them a bunch of cards. And so they're sitting there digging while also possibly dealing damage to you, and they have a lot of answers. They have the Innervate Agilities and the Veiling Breezes, and some are playing Snaring Fumes for those Azurite Fate Stones we were talking about earlier, and the Dream Fairies and stuff like that. So this one is one that's playing Rictus. We've seen ones that don't play Rictus, and then instead they're going for Ardent Cloud Strikers and the Usurp that I was talking about earlier as well. So there's 2 slight different variants, but basically one has a little bit more allies to put on board to beat down and get more value off the Rictus tiding, and other ones have a really big ally like Cloud Striker to deal 6 damage to your champion every single turn, basically. So those are 2 variants. Again, I won't talk about it too much. We have a deck profile. If you'd like to watch that, go for it. The deck basically just chips you down repeatedly. Something that's good against that, I only cover a card that's really good against this deck, is Scatter Essence. Scatter Essence plus stuff like Sensor and specifically Nullifying Lantern is really good, especially if you can do like a Fractalized Nullifying Lantern. That's also really good, obviously. Fractalized Nullifying Lantern is a combination that we've seen since the beginning of time, since FTC, where that weird interaction occurs. They can, do a lot from that. So if you can use Scatter Essence and then turn off their graveyard so they can't get the Scatter Essence back with the Cyclical Breeze, then you're in a good position to win the game at that point. Because after that, if they can't get this Razer Gale online, if they don't have a way to deal with it, then and bring it out, and so they start chipping you, they have no win con, basically. So definitely consider something, maybe a Scatter Essence or 2 if you're scared of that deck. All right, we're now into more of the aggro area of the decks that I think you guys can see, that you might see at Aki. This one being Wind Wake Up Boots. There's a couple of them that play like a level 1 champion. They might play an assassin, so they can run incaps. They might run a Lorraine, so they can bring out a sword, maybe, whatever it might be. This deck, all it is doing is going for a large combo that is hard to prevent. And they do it by turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. One thing that's really important about this deck is just removing their allies. If you're able to constantly remove their allies or force them to use some kind of suppression effect on their ally to save it, that way it doesn't have a distant every single turn or like whatever it might be, it's going to be hard for them to win the game. The best card probably in the deck, I think personally, is actually Purse. There's so much utility in this card. It has range on itself. It has ways to save itself, to save another ally, to whatever it might be. Obviously, it's not the best card. Cheshire is really good because... let me talk about the combo first. The combo is get an ally on board that has range. Let's say Concealed Marksman. There's a 3-cost 1/3 weapon or ally. It has range 4. You make it distant, so now it's attacking for 5 damage, right? Then what they'll do is use Ranger Strides, which gives a target Ranger unit range 4. So this goes from range 4, basically range 4, range is additive. So this goes to range 8 technically with that +4 from this and its own. So this is actually attacking for 9. If they have a Cheshire Cat on board, they can actually sacrifice the Cheshire Cat before they pop and sacrifice these, banish these Ranger Strides to banish Cheshire Cat, give this +4 range, then banish the Ranger Strides to give this +4 range. And now this has a total of 12 range, plus the 1 is 13. And then you use something like Draft of Stamina or Second Wind to make it attack a second time. So they can do, if they have a turn 1, if they open Draft of Stamina, know that they have a turn 2 play for a turn 2 lethal. That's how quickly this deck can pump damage. Now, they do have to have a specific set of cards to do that. They have to go Draft of Stamina into an ally that has range, like Concealed Marksman, and then make it distant with Evasive Maneuvers or Backstep, and they have a lot of things that can make it distant. They have Aether's Embrace, they have Skirting Step, they have a lot of things that can work. But essentially, they use those to make something distant, and then they use the Draft of Stamina to wake it up again. That is a turn 2 play. They go Draft of Stamina into Ranger Strides, into play an ally, make it distant, pop Ranger Strides, make it swing for, like this, in this case it would swing for 9, and then another 9 after they pop the Draft of Stamina. So 18 total. Very scary. Ways to get out around that is Crystallized Destiny can survive. Technically even Resolute can possibly make you survive a turn. Taunters and Interceptors are hard to deal with, are annoying for them to deal with. They can get around them. Don't think that just because you have one Interceptor or a Taunter on board that they can't get around it. They have ways to suppress it. They have ways to maybe even smoke bombs it, whatever it might be. They could Stifling Trap it even. They can kill it off just with another ally. So just don't think that a single Taunter or Interceptor is enough. Sometimes 2 isn't even enough. 3 is pretty difficult for them to get through. So you have 3 taunters or interceptors on board. That can be pretty difficult for them to deal with. But even through 2, they can push through 18 damage, 15, 16 damage, whatever it might be, pretty darn easily. So be aware that that's what this deck does. If you try to kill off their ally, they have Coronation Ceremony if it is a spell. If it's not Coronation Ceremony, they can give it +1 prevention with Skirting Step, and I believe +2 prevention with Evasive Maneuvers. So you can't just blow it up unless you're doing a decent amount of damage. They also run incaps. Some are on the Assassin level 1. This one is not. That's also very scary, obviously, as well, because if they're level 1, let's say Tristan, then they're holding up 3 cards, and you try to go kill off their ally at fast speed or suppress or whatever it might be, then they just can incapacitate. Another card that can be really good against them is stuff that is not a ally suppression or a action card suppression, and actually something that is Ventus. You actually, if you look at, I guess it wasn't recorded, but in Auckland, Emp played against the Wind Wake Up Boots deck and used Ventus to suppress the ally that was attacking, and that was a pretty good combination to do because they don't have a way to stop that. But that's enough about Wind Wake Up Boots. Let's talk about Water Wake Up Boots. So this is not really going all in on that game plan. They can go on that game plan. They don't have the way to wake up their ally, but they can just go for a really large attack with their champion or another ally. This one's a little bit more beat down. They have those paladins, those crystalline archers that use a floating memory in their graveyard to push damage quickly. This deck can have turn 2s though as well. It's a little more rare. It's not crazy though, but it is a little more rare. So this deck essentially is going to turbo level 1. Once you get to level 1, they're going to use Aqua Mirage Whisperer to attack your champion and set up their deck however they want, whether it be floating memory, so that way they can start using their Frostborn Paladins and Crystalline Archers, or the scarier thing, actually, if they put a Languid Toad Troll into their graveyard. This card plus Carps on Coda turns Carps on Coda into dealing 6 damage to any unit they want. And it's a skill, so it's not a spell, so Spell Shroud doesn't do anything. This 2 damage deals 6. It's a lot of damage. There's plenty of times I've played this deck and dealt 12 damage because I had 2 of these in my hand, on top of the attack that I did for 5-6 damage with Akihabara Whisperer. The range one we get from here, the Aether Charge cards that replace themselves in this deck, I believe this is one of them. Yeah, Prudent Knock, and the other one is Aetheric Calibration. These cards replace themselves. Even a Chargeless Soul that deals 1 damage, and then it itself has 1 damage for power that goes into the weapon. So you can push quite a bit of damage faster than you'd think in this deck. And then it has a lot of little combat tricks, right? They can stay alive with Tactical Retreats, which ends a combat phase if they use it defensively on their turn. They have ways to give an ally -3 life. They have ways to give an ally -3 attacks, or sorry, not an ally, a unit -3 attack and or power. And so they actually have a lot of combat tricks. It can be pretty scary when that's the case. And then they have stuff like Frozen Dismissals and obviously like Frostbind, so you have to play around those as well. So, but this deck basically is just going for really big attacks and then setting up their deck to really damage you quickly. The ways to play around this deck is stuff like Censor and Nullifying Lantern. Those are really annoying for them to deal with. It slows down their game plan quite a bit. If you do both those things, then their game plan is to put down Frostborn Paladins and Crystalline Archers and just try to go for a beatdown game plan while attacking with their champion for a little bit, and Cheshire Cats with the Inert Sword as well, and hoping that they can just start beating you down. So pay attention to that as well. And if you go for a really large Flame Sweep, they have the Tactical Retreat to back them up as well. So just be careful. This deck can be a little tricky, but it is more bursty in the early game. And if you can survive the early game at a decent life total, you're going to the late game, you're probably going to be able to just take it down, because they can run out of steam pretty quickly, especially if their graveyard is turned off with Lantern and Censor. All right. These are kind of getting to a little bit more of our honorable mentions. Not quite. I have Faiza pulled up here, but this is kind of just fire aggro in general. We're seeing this actually less and less. We haven't seen Fire Suzaku as much as, I guess I should say, we haven't seen it top as much because people aren't playing some kind of outs to allies, actually. Something like Flame Wreath Call is devastating to Fire Suzaku. And so we're kind of seeing Fire Faiza come back a little bit more. It's Faiza. I mean, they have a lot of burst. Nullifying Lantern can be good in this deck, or against this deck, sorry. Safeguard Amulet can be good against this deck. Terrafring can be good against this deck. Blowing up their Poison Dagger can be good, destroying it one way or another. Putting down Taunts and Interceptors can be good. Destroying Arthur and killing Arthur early can be really good if that is their play. There's a lot of things that this deck can do in terms of like how powerful it can go, right? Those Blazing Throws with all the weapons can be really strong. The Impact Hammer with Heated Vengeance can be really strong, but it is bursty. So you survive that early game, you recover enough life, you protect yourself enough while getting to level 3. Once you get to that high life total, it's gonna be way harder for them to kill you because they do just run out of steam because they don't have cards to replace themselves. Something to be scared of though is Peppered Chef. I think this is one of probably the most powerful cards in the deck right now, where they're able to put down like on a 6-card hand, put down, swing with something, whether it be a Rococo, a Blazing Bowman, whatever. And if they have an Arthur on board, they can swing with play Arthur, play an ally, or maybe have another ally on board, kill off with Pepper Chef. Pepper Chef is now attacking for 5 because of the Arthur, and then use another Pepper Chef to kill off the last Pepper Chef, and then attack another 5, and maybe follow up with a Kindle if they have more than 6 cards in hand. It is a very strong combo that can deal a lot of damage really quickly, similar to Suzaku, but they don't have to go that game plan. They have other ways to attack and deal damage to you, and so and they have a decent amount of cycle, so you have to be careful of that as well. Stuff with Red Hair and Korhazi Courier, but there's a lot of cards that can slow them down. Like I said, like Resolute Stand is amazing. A lot of decks are playing Resolute Stand, so I wouldn't be too scared about this deck. I think you can play out of it, but of course, if they get the right hand, it can be pretty hard to beat. Oh, also Dungeon Guide. Dungeon Guide is very good against that deck. If you see a Dungeon Guide, you're pretty happy if you're a level 3 deck because that probably just won you the game right there. All right, last deck. This is an oddball one. This is the last deck before I get to some of the honorable mentions that I don't have pulled up here, but I do want to briefly mention them as well. Water Allies, specifically Water Allies CL. We have seen this deck an odd amount. I don't know if you've noticed, because it kind of slipped through here and there because not a lot of people are playing it, but there are decks that have been topping while playing Water Allies CL. It's a little weird because I think the current meta, it is a little bit of a lotto matchup, Swiss lotto matchup, but they have stuff for those big attacks with Song of Frost and Korhazi Trappers and even Cerulean Decrees. And they have ways to stop you from leveling up with stuff like Snow White, Weiss Queen, and Freezing Hail on repeats. And this deck is on something a little interesting, which is Sadi's, but it is going for a beatdown game plan with those Aquifers and Frostworm Paladins and those Juyings with the unique allies. And they actually have a lot of just utility. And if you're not playing around this utility, if you're not aware of this utility, it can blow you out of the game if you're not expecting it. So this isn't one that I expect to see even 5% of the tournament there, but maybe 5%, maybe actually exactly 5% of the meta. But we are seeing it more and more. And I want to bring this up because a deck like this is one of those decks that people are just not expecting at all and are worried. And if they sat down and played against it and did not realize that they were playing against a Water Ally CL, they could lose the game because they might be expecting the level 3 Water CL that's going a little slower, that's focusing on Graveyard a little more, and try to bring out stuff like Censor against them, and try to bring out stuff that's going to slow them down and eat floating cards out of their graveyard when they don't care about that at all. All they're actually doing is go for a beatdown game plan. And so be aware that something like this, decks like this, not exactly this deck, and the reason why I brought up this deck was just because it was one I found, but there are similar decks to this where it's always good to not just assume 100% your opponent is on a deck just because they reveal a certain champion or spirit and or champion at the beginning of the game. There's enough cards and enough decks in this game and currently in this meta that if they show a certain spirit and even a level 1 champion, you are not 100% certain what deck they're on. So this is just kind of like a helpful reminder of this deck, of this play style, I should say, while you're going into Aki, that you shouldn't just take for granted what you're playing against. Make sure you're not just playing sloppy. Don't play too fast. Don't play too slow because you don't want to go to time. But just be aware, just try to think of, if you see Water Spirit, okay, if I see Water Spirit, what is it? Is it Water Diana with the boots and all that kind of stuff? Is it Water CL? And if it's Water CL, is it level 1 and just going for allies, or is it level 3? Is it, if we see Spirit of Water, could we be playing against a weird Merlin, Water Merlin variant that we've seen in the past, or a weird Water Lorraine that we've seen in the past, or a different type of Water ally that might be running stuff like, you know, it might be going to level 1 Assassin, so they might be running incap. So maybe I shouldn't go for this cremation ritual right here, because they actually could just be able to incapacitate that cremation ritual, and I would just lose the game on the spot. So what would be something else that wouldn't lose me the game on the spot? Maybe I should try playing around that, and then try to buy one more turn so I can try to guarantee and figure out what I might be playing against, and get you further into Aki. Honorable mentions. All right, so I'm just going to name off a couple of decks that we haven't seen in a little bit, but or I haven't seen a ton of, but I do want to make you aware. First, Zaka kind of mentioned that earlier. We haven't seen a ton of it recently. We did see a lot before, but it definitely could be something you see here in Aki. Another one that we might be able to see is actually Wind Lorraine level 3, like Crux Lorraine. That is starting to pop up here and there more and more, and people really like that deck. So just be aware that that might be a deck that you might be playing against. Wind allies, just generic wind allies, but probably more closely related is wind unique allies, that has the ability to maybe flex into that boots combo if it needs to, but really just going for allies on board that have a lot of combat tricks. I think this was overshadowed by wind wake up boots, but definitely be aware that that could be a deck that is in the meta. And then two more here, I guess a couple more, they're in different variants, but I'll say Rye and Xander. So this is Wind and Fire Rye. Those have been popping up here and there. So be aware that those could be decks that you might see at this meta at Aki. Don't forget that those decks exist when you sit down against a Wind or Fire deck. It might be one of those decks. And then also a Wind and Fire Rise, Xander, level 3, specifically Luxem. You could possibly see that deck as well, those decks as well. So Wind Xander has the ability to flex in a lot of manner to do things here and there, to play around a lot of different combat tricks with the ensnaring fumes and getting to level 3 really efficiently and picking up their own allies repeatedly, and using Wind Engineers on repeat to get them a lot of value, and definitely could see that deck. And then Fire Luxem as well. It is a pretty popular deck. It has been in the past. We haven't seen it recently, but definitely could be a deck that you see at Aki. And then the last deck, I kind of forgot about it, but I definitely wanted to mention it, which is Water Guoa. So Water Self-Mill in one way or another. Definitely could see that deck as well be part of the meta. Definitely just be aware of it. Bring your sensors and nullifying lanterns and try to figure out if you need to fit them into your main or your side, or maybe one and one in each. Or if you don't think there's going to be any, or your deck can deal with those decks without them, then maybe you don't need them at all. But definitely consider those cards. That's it for all these decks, guys. I know this was a longer video. Sorry about that. But I did want to bring every single deck that I could think of to your attention. You might not be able to play against and test against all these decks, but it is always good to be aware of what you could be playing against here, especially at a very large event like Aki. You can be played against anything. So I hope you found this helpful. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.